Hi, welcome to Integrative Preparedness. I'm Steve Smith. Today I want to talk about survival in an urban, a suburban, and a rural situation. And I think that some of you will be a little bit surprised about my take on it. First, I want to mention a couple of things. I want to direct you to a couple of other YouTube channels that one of which I just discovered. A guy, and actually one of his is what made me want to do this one today. I had this on the list of things to do, but I happened to see one of his the other day, and so I felt that it's not a video response or anything like that. It made me slip this in my excuse me in my list. He left a comment on one of my videos, which of course made me click on him to find out who he was, and his name is Steve, and his channel is Corsair Trainer. And I'm sorry, I don't remember whether it's Trainer or Trainers, but I'll ask my guru to put the link down to his YouTube channel on this. And I've watched several of his things, and I just like the way that he comes off. I like the way that he thinks. He's a real world guy, and I think that you'll enjoy him too. So, and I've only watched, I think he's got a series on urban survival, maybe 7 or 8, and I've only watched one, and that just, like I said, I like the way that he comes off, and that's why I slipped this in here. So go to him and watch his stuff. I think he's got good stuff, and I think you'll like him. I like the way that he comes off. The other one was an old YouTube channel that has been around for just a long time. And if you're just now getting into prepping, or even if you've been in it for a little while, he's one that I really suggest, and that is Southern Prepper 1. He hasn't been active for a while. He brought one out not long ago, and I was really happy to see it. And I thought maybe he was going to come back and start putting out videos again. But I haven't seen anything in the last couple of weeks, I think. So I don't know to what extent he's coming back. But watch all of his old stuff. This guy is he's a thoughtful guy. His name is David. And I'm sorry that I don't remember his last name right off. I don't know either of these guys, obviously, so I'm just suggesting because I think they're a good watcher. He was also, I believe, partners with Scott Hunt. And okay, I better not go any farther than that because there's a couple of names that are kind of close together, and I wouldn't want to give the wrong one. Anyway, watch those guys and watch all of Southern Prepper stuff. He is well put together. He is well prepared. He's going to give you good advice. What's the other thing that I was going to say before we get into this? I've turned over all of my media to my son because he understands it a lot better than I do. So he has put all of the videos that we've made so far onto the Integrative Preparedness website, which is integrativepreparedness.com. One thing on there that I will say, if you go there, and you'll see down on somewhere on the page it says, that we are part of our business is to do assessments, security assessments, and property assessments, and helping people, understand not just the physical preparation part, but from a security standpoint. I don't suggest that you call us. We're booked for the next couple of years that I can see, and I'm just not one of those that is going to keep booking business that I know we can't get to in a timely manner, and I don't expand my staff just to do business. I like to keep a personal eye on it and a personal tab on it, so we only do what we can do to the extent that I feel we've done an A1 job. So I'm going to have them take that off. If you've seen that on there, I'm sorry. I'm sure there are other companies out there that do that stuff. So, I hope you find a good one. Now, back to urban, suburban, and rural situations and who's going to survive. Okay. I grew up in a very nice neighborhood, in a very nice suburb, in a very nice city during the 50s and 60s. Where I lived was it was a real Leave It to Beaver kind of neighborhood, and I lived a Leave It to Beaver lifestyle. Dad worked, came home, Mom kept the house. I came home to milk and cookies and people asking how my day was, and then I went out and played with my friends, and if my mom worked, which she did later on part time, she always made it clear to them that she wasn't coming to work until we were in school, and she was going to be home by the time we got home because she was going to have our milk and cookies there, right? May sound strange today, but that's really the way that things were. That's the way a lot of people grew up in those days. The place that I lived was always in the top 10 and nationally in quality of life and school quality of schools, more often than not in the top 3. So I grew up really in a golden age, in a golden area. When I was 14, I spent a good part of the summertime over at my grandparents' house in the city. And this was right close to the inner city. And I did that because I had a crush on a little girl that lived down on the corner. But I spent a lot of time over there, and that was the summer that Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr. were assassinated. And if anybody's old enough to remember that, the entire country just blew up. The city where we were, Kansas City, it burned. Martial law was declared. You couldn't be out after dark. You couldn't buy gasoline in a container because of all the fire bombings around. So everybody's grass was high. I remember very clearly the National Guard patrolling the streets. And it was my first real introduction to a lifestyle and a part of society that was much different than the one I'd grown up in. Through the years, I had kind of a double life there, part in the suburbs, part in the city, because I had a lot more in common with the guys, my friends in the city, because I'd rather be racing my car and shooting pool in a dodgy pool hall than playing tennis. So anyway, I grew up in the suburbs. I turned 21. I went on the police department down in the city. Shortly after that, I went on the sheriff's department of a major county out there close to it. Rode county districts for a while, so for a short amount of time was a town marshal in a little town in Missouri because they contracted their marshal at the time from the sheriff's department. And then did most of my time in uniform with the sheriff's department in what we called a city district because it was in the city. It didn't belong to anybody, so the sheriff's department had to take care of it. And it was just a little ghetto slum. Looked like, well, I won't go any farther than that, but two motorcycle clubs had their headquarters in there, and there was massage parlors, and we used to say that it had a higher percentage of felon residents than any place in the state outside the city or the state penitentiary. So anyway, I did that. After some years of that, I went undercover narcotics, worked in motorcycle gangs, and some other stellar types of organizations. From there, I went and worked with a couple of federal task forces. Well, one what they called a strike force with one federal agency, and then it went into another thing, and they called it a task force with another federal agency, and then did a little bit in warrants and fugitives. So I had, and during that time, I should interject, my family owned farms down in central Missouri, so I had the opportunity to spend time down there during these summers, out in the woods and riding horses, and I raised horses and a lot of things. So I've had a life experience that has allowed me to see the different elements, not just from the outside, but from the inside, So that's where my point of view comes from. Now, we've heard all this stuff about if everything collapses, the cities are going to explode, the throngs of people are going to spill out of the cities, raiding the suburbs and the farms and killing everything in their path and following the highways and what they call the lines of drift. And I think that's pretty much been the standard. And I'm not sure, to be honest, because I didn't pay a lot of attention to the first years of the growing preparedness movement. Although I've always been, lived that kind of life, I didn't really pay attention. So I'm not sure where this came from. I do think it came from a book or two that I can think of. But then, like so often happens, once something gets out there in the mainstream, people repeat it and repeat it and repeat it, and all of a sudden somebody's opinion becomes just the accepted truth. And if you say that you don't agree with that, then they're going to say, well, what do you know? Of course it's going to be like this. Well, I am not at all sure that it would be like that. There are some tough people in the country, right? Tough people. I don't know any tougher folks than rodeo guys that I know. Okay, but country folks are hardworking and they're tough. There are some tough people in the suburbs. Now, people don't like to think about that because they make a lot of jokes about yuppies and millennials and everything like that. Well, you don't get to live in a $700,000 million house because you're stupid. And many of these people have life backgrounds that are not the marshmallow puff kind of lifestyle that sometimes they're made out to be. There are some tough folks, some smart folks, some resilient folks, and some prepared folks in that. There are also some tough people in the city. People who are resilient and intelligent and self-sufficient. And by that, I don't mean the kind of self-sufficiency that they go out and milk their own cows, but they know how to survive. We have tough people everywhere. We have good people everywhere, and we've got some jerks, some bad folks everywhere. It's mixed up. I'm just now addressing in my third book, The Renewal, this idea of surviving communities within the urban core of a major city. And I think that's exactly what would happen. Okay, if the city erupts, and I covered that a little bit in the first book, The Reversion, it's going to be horrible. I mean, it's going to be more horrible in a city than it would be in a small town. I'm not arguing that. It'll just be terrible because there are so many people, so densely packed, with so few resources and so little understanding of how to take care of themselves and provide for themselves, that people are going to start dropping like flies from just violence, social collapse, tainted water, starvation, the fact that a disproportionate percentage of people in the city are family units without fathers. Okay, it is not going to work out well in the city. But there are going to be some that will. I'm sure of that. Now, if and when, although I'm not at all sure that there's going to be a when, these people, having depleted all of their resources in the city, start moving out towards the suburbs, it's not like they're not going to meet any resistance. There are some bad boys in the suburbs. Okay, and in the inner or the outer urban core, and I know them. I grew up with them. I know a lot of them now. There are some good boys there, and they're not just going to let these people come out and roll all over them and take their food and their wives and their daughters and whatever. And they've got guns and they know how to shoot, and many of them have military and police background, and the ones who don't are just as bad as the ones who do. Okay. So if there is a movement out of the urban core toward the outer urban areas before we get to what's really called the suburbs, there's going to be a battle royal, and I would guess that most of the people trying to get out of the city will not get out of the city. Those who do, they're going to get into the suburbs. There's some bad boys in the suburbs. Okay, there's guys out here that they may sell insurance now, and they may own a company now, but they have backgrounds that they're extremely capable people, and they are armed to the teeth. You would be surprised, and I was, when I a lot of times those who are preparedness oriented, we kind of keep it on the down low. We keep it to ourselves. We don't broadcast it. When I came out with the first book, The Reversion, and some people that I knew just around here, and we live in the suburbs, and we live in a very nice area. And as people started to learn that I had written this book, they got it, and they started coming to me in numbers that would surprise you, and telling me about their preparedness. And they sent me pictures of their supplies. They sent me pictures or took me down and showed me their gun rooms. And let me just say this, it is not going to be an easy task getting through the suburbs if you already got through the outer urban ring. Okay. Does the urban area and the suburbs have the areas to run the kind of operations that the rural areas do, livestock, large planting operations and stuff like that? No, but they do have some. They're probably not going to be in the livestock, but they're going to have some. And the die-off, if we expect, as they say, and who knows, this is a guess. The EMP Commission brought this up. If it's a true collapse, under something like that, a grid down situation, a 90% die-off of the affected area, we would expect to see it probably at a higher percentage in the urban core, somewhat less in the outer urban circle, somewhat less in the suburban area, and perhaps even less still out in the rural areas. But I will say this also, that I have been surprised how many people in the rural areas are not that prepared. They may have land, they might have a few cows roaming around, but they still work in town, or they're retired, or whatever. It's not those big operations that you think would be self-sufficient in the long term immediately. So anyway, my point for coming out with this, first I wanted to compliment Corsair Trainers for coming out with that, and I'm going back and I'm going to watch the rest of his series. I didn't want to watch any more before I made mine. I'm going to watch the rest of that, so I do suggest you watch him. And watch Dave Kobler. I just remembered his last name. I believe that's Southern Prepper 1. But just go to Southern Prepper and then the 1, the numeral 1 on YouTube, and you can learn a lot from that guy. So the point of this is, if you live in the suburbs, if you live in the city, it's good to have a place to go. You're darn right. It's good to have a place to go, and we have a place to go, if we need to get out of here. But it doesn't mean that you're necessarily, going to go down the drain and go down the tubes. It has to do with how prepared you are, how smart you are, how tough you are, and your mindset. How defensible your position is, your situation with the community and the other people that are around you, being able to form a group and a community that comes together in a mutually assistant and supportive fashion. But there are going to be, in my opinion, there are going to be communities that will survive and survive fairly well in rural areas, in suburban areas, and in urban areas. So with that, I'll call it a day right now. It's Saturday, and my daughter slept late, so she missed out on the pancakes this morning, so I'm going to go make her some pancakes of her own. I'll be back in a couple of days and with another one. Thank you for being here, and I hope you have a good one. Bye-bye.